Next item.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning and welcome to today's Performance and Scrutiny Committee people. Okay, it's Wednesday the 21st of January. No, it's not. It is. It's been a long day and a long night already. But before we get underway, I have to read this statement. It's called a housekeeping statement. And it says the Scrutiny Committee is being live streamed on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which operates alongside the Council's standing orders. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. As always, a recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting, while translations of this proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recordings may also be recorded and used for training purposes within the Council. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go into it. Any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Jenkins, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting, which is on pages 3, which refers to the 2nd of December. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes?
Move it.
Seconder, I'll second that, that's fine. And on page 5, minutes for the 9th of December. We have a mover, well, I'll move, and a seconder. Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any matters arising from those minutes? Right, thank you. The next item now is the draft budget, and we're going on to item 4. And we're going to start on page 13 and go through to page 30. And he's going to take us through this.
So I'm not.
No, not.
He's going to do it.
Oh, so
He's going
okay.
to do it. So.
Well, that's even.
Even better. Even better. So.
Yeah. Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for taking us through this and letting my colleague off the book.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Can we put the presentation up, please? Okay, next slide. So just here today, we're just going to give you an overview really of the whole budget process. So just a bit of background for you. So the draft budget paper was approved by Cabinet on the 12th of January. The public consultation process started on the 13th and it ends at the end of the month. So Welsh Government, they announced their final settlement yesterday. And Cabinet has got to agree the final budget on the 11th of Feb, and then Council to approve the budget and set the council tax on the 24th of February. And obviously this session is part of the consultation process, and your feedback will be attached to the final budget paper that goes to Cabinet. Next slide, please. Any questions on that?
Not for me.
Okay.
So we don't have any questions.
Okay. So obviously budget changes every year. We've got cost changes, funding changes. So this just shows a table basically of inflationary changes per service area, totaling about 18.7 million. Then there's pressures which are obviously beyond inflation. So they're totaling 7.7 million. So these are in the MTFP that they're funded. And then obviously there's a savings column as well, showing that we've put into the paper £4 million worth of savings. You'll notice that these are mainly non-service and cross-service savings. So the cross-service savings, that relates to a reduction in the employer's pension contribution. That's as a result of our triennial valuation of the pension. So we're able to take that saving, and obviously that will be allocated across the service areas as part of the final budget. So there's very little service area savings. So this is why really there's been more focus on the non-funded pressures, which we'll go into later, which is part of the new process that we've done this year. So just a little bit about our funding this year. So at the draft budget, we had 20.8 million from the Welsh Government.
Next slide.
Next slide, yeah. 4.3 million of this, though, is just replacing existing grants. So there was 16.5 million new funding. So 4.3 of it already existed practically within our budgets as a grant. So this is obviously based on the original Welsh Government announcement, not the announcement made yesterday. So they made a further announcement on the 9th of December that there was 102.8 million for local government, and those individual allocations were announced yesterday. 6.3 million extra has been raised from council tax in this draft budget. So 4.3 million of that is raised from that proposed 4.9 increase. And then the rest of it is obviously from an increase in the council tax base, and we've also increased the collection rate. That's all in the report. Then obviously 4 million savings, which I've already mentioned as well. And this has no impact on services. Next slide, please. Okay. So just a little bit of inflation. So the pay planning assumptions we've used is 3% from April 26 and 2.5% after. So these assumptions have come really from the CPI is expected to fall to about 2.2% in 26-27, and wage growth is also expected to fall. And this assumption as well is also in line with the other local authorities, so they're all assuming somewhere between 2.5 and 3%. There's also a lot of inflation with our contracted costs, and some of this, the majority of this is commission care, and this is in relation to the real living wage. So this increased from £12.60 an hour to £13.45, and that's effectively a 6.7 increase in staffing, commissioned care costs. So we've had to build all this into the inflation model. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary of the funded MTFP pressures. So this is the 7.7 million that was shown in the summary table earlier. So this is broken down into previously agreed pressures. So this is the ones that were agreed in the last budget setting round, that obviously had a multi-year impact. And then there's 5.5 million of new additional pressures. And that's the service area split. Next one, please. Okay, specifically for schools, so the total pressure and investment of schools is 8.4 million. Okay, so there's no savings included in the draft budget for schools. They're maintaining funding levels on a per pupil basis, and we're also investing in the ALN needs as well. So there's 369k for the LRBs and 205k then for universal provision. Okay. Teachers as well, what we've done is 3% for their pay award from September 26 and the NJC staff from April 26. So there's a short table there. It's just a summary of the anticipated school pressures for the next few years. Next slide, please. So it just brings me on really to our new budget approach. So what we did this year, we really focused on managing budget pressures. And this is really due to the fact there's really little opportunity or scope now to identify new savings. So we had to come up with a different way really to lower our costs. Obviously, there is an inherent risk with this approach because the service areas obviously have to carry a series of actions to actually mitigate some of these cost pressures, to reduce them so they don't overspend then next year. So there is a little bit of a risk with it because, you know, those actions do have to be. So there's 4.9 million of identified pressures, which are not included in the budget. And like I said, they're being managed now through either budget realignment with existing resources, service redesign, or through one-off funding or grant funding. Okay, so we have got a table of the additional pressures identified by service area that are not funded. So the service areas, they have identified mitigating actions to manage these pressures. So they will need to implement these actions before or soon after the start of the financial year. Next slide, please. So there's the table. So as you can see, it's predominantly through adult services and children's services is the majority of that 4.7 million for 26-27. And they're going to achieve that mitigation through service redesign. Okay, so the next slide is just a summary of the budget savings in the MTFP. So again, there's that £4 million there. You can see that the majority of that is not in the service area, so there's very little savings to actually scrutinise this year. Which brings me on to the next slide. So our recommended approach for the scrutiny review is to review the delivery of the unfunded budget pressures through the mitigation. So the head service will obviously go through their plans, and I believe some of them have got presentations as well. Review the budget assumptions with pay and inflation, and to review budget investments as well, the adequacy. So,
I mean, Chair, all I would say is that three things, two in particular for this committee, which is important. So one is commission care. The council will be adhering to the commitments made to fund the real living wage for care workers across the city. That obviously comes at quite a cost, 6.7% increase in that, but the budget makes provision for that to be the case. That's good. And schools are funded in full for their cost pressures next year, and there are no savings there. And as Pin has said, generally there are no savings for this committee to get its teeth into this time around, but clearly the fourth issue here is that there are real cost pressures here, you know, 2.7 million in social care which are not funded, but colleagues will be explaining to you how they'll be managed next year, so that they are not issues or problems hopefully next year. So those are four kind of key summary messages that we will give you at this point. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to see if there's any questions at this point. We're going to open it up now to committees to see if there's any questions either online or in the room.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two questions, although I think the second one, based on what you just said, Mike, I think this might be better aimed at the heads of service, but I'll ask the question anyway. The first question is just to do with, I think we just see a second slide thing where you mentioned about the income that's coming to the council. And you mentioned that Welsh governments were updated yesterday.
Yes.
With your allocations. Are you able to give any figures on that at the moment? And how that might affect the budget projections?
Yes, so, well, they've given an extra 6.036 million from the draft settlement.
That's for Newport, 6 million for Newport.
For Newport, yes.
Right.
Correct.
And it's probably too early at the moment, but are you able to say how that might affect the... That's good. Silly question, I know, it's silly now. My second question was, to be honest, I think this might be for the heads of service, but you mentioned about the various actions that might be taken to mitigate the pressure.
Yes, there's going to be.
I'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harvey?
Thanks, Chair. If the savings slip, what is the mitigation for it? What have we got as a backstop to protect the council?
The savings, so they're relatively, the majority of relatively low risk, so there's all the mitigations are savings. Yeah, so that will be an in-year financial management issue.
So the mitigation we have is that we have a £1.6 million budget contingency.
Yes, we do.
In the budget. We would anticipate some savings on our capital financing budgets next year. We've been saving significantly on that budget for a few years now as we pre-funded that budget. That's running out now, so next year there will be a saving. That will be the last year, we think. So those two budgets, one's a proper contingency and one is an ongoing underspend that we'll have for another year. They will provide some mitigation for us next year.
So like a rainy day bit there.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the contingency for sure is there for that purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move on? Councillor Watkins.
Well, you mentioned about care workers being paid a living wage. Does that mean that if we use private accommodation, how are we going to guarantee that that is going to be passed on to the personnel of that company?
Yeah, I'll answer this one. I mean, our social care colleagues can also answer this one maybe when they come to you later. But our commission care team in social care should be ensuring that all of their providers that they are using are paying at least the real living wage. And we've made sure that the budgets are funded for that to happen. There's always a negotiation with the providers. Just because we've funded the budgets, that doesn't mean that it's still enough. There's always an annual, pretty robust kind of process between that team and the providers, where we ensure that the budgets are uplifted by what is needed for that as best as possible. And that should be a condition of those contractors working for us, those suppliers working for us.
The other question is how are you going to mitigate any future increases in services which are required by NCC next 12 months?
I can understand that. I mean, yeah,
if the financial pressure comes to NCC or the next financial year, which we haven't budgeted for, which some of it you haven't budgeted for, how are you going to mitigate the the problems which that presents?
I would give you the same answer as I gave to Councillor Harvey, which is to say the council has a contingency budget of 1.6 million. There will be a final year of savings on the capital financing budget next year, which we know now. They will be available for us to mitigate any financial impacts from any and all issues. Beyond that, it's about us as officers working with cabinet to manage in-year financial management.
Okay. Would like to see the plan B. Thank you, Chair.
And a plan C. Is there any other questions? Okay. Before we move on, the next will be education. But before we move on, can our other services please note that the question regarding the real living wage that will come up, and how do you ensure that providers are actually adhering to paying the real living wage, and what do we do if they're not? Because the most important thing is provision. That's the most important thing, is provision. But however, we have a standard that we have set, and how do you manage that? So if you could just bear that in mind when you're giving your answers going forward. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll wait for a little bit of a changeover. Okay, Sarah, we're going to do an introduction.
Chair, I would say that my did the overview, if I can repeat that, so just on the basis that education is due to receive, schools are due to receive 8.4 million in the budget consultation proposals. That's a 5.6 increase in funding, and that accounts for new and expanding schools in the city. It also accounts for teachers' pay awards, for non-teaching pay awards, for inflationary rises in contracts, and there's new investments in LRBs at both secondary. For education services, there's an increase in £500,000, which will go to the pupil referral unit to support education school provision, and with a focus on reducing out-of-county spend. There is also investment into ALN for schools as well. One of the things to highlight in terms of risks to mitigating education services is that we need to consider a saving of £102,000, which is currently earmarked for school-based counselling, although we are going out to procurement. So that is not an absolute definite, so that £102,000 will be an overspend. We may be able to save that through the new procurement process, but as a backstop position, we won't overspend there because we have a grant that we can use to offset it.
Okay, thank you. Rhys, do you have anything to add?
No, not at the moment.
Not at the moment.
Happy to talk to you with questions.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to go through the papers from 34 to 39. That might help us a bit. And then if there's any questions on the previous explanations that have been given out, or even if we pick up as we go along, you can ask then, please. Okay, so page 34. And 35. Something.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, she has,
On the bridge.
yeah, on the, Councillor Cleverly.
Yes, I wanted to ask for an update, Sarah, on the Bridge Achievement Centre, the expansion, because being on the governor for Newport Eye and the primary schools, I found there's more and more young people that's got ALN problems, and are they attending there as well? Or?
That depends on the nature of the provision that's needed by the pupil. So for instance, if there is a specific issue where a child can't attend a mainstream school, the pupil referral unit, which is all of our education other than at school or EOTIS provision, there is provision there for children with social, emotional, behavioural needs to attend the pupil referral unit. But earlier, myself and Myriam talked about the investment in learning resource spaces. And a good example of an investment that's being made in this budget proposal is a further 10 places for secondary pupils with ASD, and that will be an expansion to the highly successful Lambron Learning Resource Base this year moving forward. So yes, there will be additional provision.
Because I've had some parents saying when the new school is built in Bettis, there's not going to be enough placements for the ALN as well.
Yeah,
so,
and to comment on that, it's really important that we carefully manage the numbers of children in learning resource spaces, and it doesn't become disproportionate to the school. Mm-hmm. And while there is one school in the city that has provision for 30 children, that's a one-off. And it's not a model that we would necessarily follow throughout the city, because it can be, it can have challenges in managing 3 10-place provisions, and we wouldn't do that. And so we don't think that it's meaningful to put additional places in the new build. So the 20 places that exist across the 2 schools, when they amalgamate, will still have 20 places. But bearing in mind as well, because all of our learning resource spaces are citywide provisions, children can attend other learning resource spaces. They're not just linked to a specific school.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Question, I'm not particularly sure what page, so forgive me, it's a bit of a thing, but it's just more the fact of looking at the investments into buildings to hopefully reduce the revenue. Is there any scope on that? Because obviously that does have an effect on school budgets, especially when we're coming in, and sometimes later down the line we note about pressures and things like that there. Is there anything being done in order to address those points that may have an effect on what we see moving forward?
Yes, the carbon reduction team are working with schools to support efficiency levels through heat pumps, through solar power, etc. It can take some time to feel and see those savings. However, what I would also say is that becomes a council budget saving rather than an individual saving, as the council are investing in that infrastructure and those energy efficiencies. Those schools would receive less funding, which would match their energy expenditure. That means that we'd have more money to spend then across the estate.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
thank you, Chair. I've got a question to do with ALM. I haven't linked it to a particular page number, so you haven't really
I have to that now, yeah.
Yes, I say to do with the ALM provision in the city. In the report, it talks about some projected changes to ALM provision and some obviously improvements we're looking at, and obviously an increase in demand for ALM provision as well. I'm just wondering, are you able to expand a little bit on what the current provisions are within the city and how you see that expanding as we move forward? And once you've sort of explained those changes, are you able to say what measures you would use or what indicator you use to measure the success, hopefully, of those changes? I don't know if I worded that very well, but does that make
No,
sense?
it makes sense. Thank you. Just bear with me 1 minute. And I can give you an accurate account of how many LRB spaces there are in the city, and that would be helpful.
I suppose what I'm really driving at is the money that's going to be put into A-level provision. How are we going to measure how successful that investment has been once it's been implemented? And what the changes are likely to be? That's effectively what I'm asking you.
Okay, so currently, if you look at LRB capacity, there are 225 places across the city, and they're generally in 10-place blocks. Okay, some schools have 2 10-place blocks, as I've talked about, so 20 overall. There's one school that has 3. And they're dispersed across the city, and ideally what we'd like to do is make sure that we've got one learning resource base at least in each cluster. Or we'd like to put more, expand the capacity where there is more needs in specific communities, I suppose, so that children don't have to travel as far, and that the cost of individual taxis, for instance, where they are required, they're not always required for learning resource bases, then we are not going so far in distance, and so therefore they are more cost effective. Okay?
Right.
We also have to bear in mind waiting lists, and at the moment there are a number of pupils on the waiting list for LRBs. That in itself is an indicator that we need to expand the learning resource spaces. Okay, so 2 additional primary resource spaces means that the waiting lists that we currently have would reduce significantly to almost a 0 position.
Right.
And I think that's one element of success, that to show that we have enough provision.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one aspect to look at. But of course, then there is the quality assurance work that we do in partnership with our schools to make sure that our learning resource bases are providing the right provision for the pupils that are attending the provision. And with that, we do a 360-degree review, looking at the learning environment, the quality of teaching and learning, the targeted and universal provision that's available to those pupils, whether the pupils are having their individual development plans met, and their local authority IDPs. That's another example of success. In secondaries, we do have surrounding the same number of places, and what we're noticing is a specific shortfall in ASD places, hence the decision to expand an already successful LRB provision at secondary, which already exists, to have a further 10 places. Okay. And ASD you will see this as a growth across the city, and that's again why we've made those strategic decisions to expand the provision at Ysgol Brynderw. So you will have seen that we've expanded the site at Chynhwysiant with more additional places.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Can I just ask, you mentioned about one of the indicators being whether pupils have their ILPs met.
Yes, yeah.
Is that assessment done by the school themselves and then sent to you, or are they independently verified?
It's generally done in collaboration. So if children are attending LRB, there is generally a collaborative meeting between parents, the school, and the local authority staff to assess the current provision. It doesn't happen every single year, but it might happen every other year. But it is an entitlement, it reflects that can be fulfilled.
And then finally, the pupils you mentioned that's on a waiting list at the moment, are their needs met then with in-class support, individual in-class support, rather than the LRB provision?
The schools have delegated responsibility to meet those needs of
Yeah.
the children in mainstream while they're awaiting their places.
And then I'm assuming has a cost implication to the school.
And that is supported through the AMN delegated funding.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any other further questions?
Two questions. You say there's an 8.4 million uplift for education.
For schools.
Schools.
Yeah.
And you think that, or you believe that that would be sufficient to meet all the needs of?
I don't think you'll find a public servant that can say that a public service budget adequately fulfills everything. My job as head of service is to mitigate the risks, and I think that my opinion would be professionally that this is not making any savings. This is meeting the demands and the cost pressures of schools. Individual schools would have separate views and they are part of the budget consultation.
The other question is, Chair, over the past financial year, 24-25, we have seen the cost of transport for schools balloon. If we're going to have more LRBs, learning resource bases, how are we going to manage the cost in regards to transport? Obviously, that's going to have to increase.
Oh, so what I can tell you is that there's a specific funding formula that the finance team use when we're considering the establishment of further LRB places, and it's based on prior trends. So a good example is, I believe that if you're looking at ASD provision at secondary, there's about an 86% chance of a young person needing transport assistance in a taxi, and so that is factored into the budget. Now, because children are individuals, that we could go over that budget, we can be based on their individual needs, or we could come under. But that is the an appropriate methodology to use when calculating the finance.
Just to say on that, so there's on page 34, that is reflected in the investments. Yes, the specific transport investment.
The other thing is, Chair, in regards to, at the moment, according to page 35, you have 28 people on the waiting list, and you're hoping to find places for those over the next financial year, so 26, 27. How do you see 27, 28? Do you think, I think anyway, whether you think or not, is, do you think that those will be replaced by other pupils coming in to this educational service?
That's possible, and it depends on how children are managing in schools, and so that often takes time to be able to establish the evidence base for that. But the other factor which is important to note is that whilst other children are coming in, there is also the drop-off point. So with LRBs at primary school, for instance, you've got year 6 which is vacating, and in secondary you've got year 11 that will be vacating their position as well. And they can be, in some years, those year 6 and year 11 numbers are more top-heavy than in other years. So we look at those forecasts as well, but we haven't got a full understanding of every young child, every young person and child that's coming into the system might need those places. That's for the LRB, that's for the SEN team to determine.
What concerns me, Chair, at the moment we are planning to expand the LRB numbers. So obviously, I understand that you're going new students coming in and the other students are leaving, but we're still getting those numbers. So how are we going to manage that expansion over the next, say, 2 or 3 years?
I think it would be up to the head of service, myself, to put a a cost pressure into future years. I think there's also a consideration for finding the right space as well, because an LRD needs access to outside space. It can't be just placed anywhere. And our schools, of course, some schools have space for an LRD and some schools don't. What I can assure you of is the team are working with our head teachers to look at potential space for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions on page 36, where it says about the potential loss of RAF funding, estimated 50%. What is being put in place to mitigate that loss of 50%?
Hang on. No, this is.
That's
Yeah,
to prevent
it is.
We're not quite there yet.
We're not on that part. I know it does seem a bit, we're flip-flopping about a bit, but we're not actually on that item yet.
Right.
So if you could come back, that would be very helpful. It's a great question, so make a note of that, please.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you very much indeed. Sarah, what might be useful for us to understand is a breakdown of the 8.4 million that's going into school. I know that 3.8 of that is going for pay, and I believe that 620 or 768k is going for ALN. Can you sort of fill in those gaps as well? So or am I asking you too much?
I'm sure our finance team can help.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
can.
so we've got 3.1
Thank you.
million relates to the pay award for substitute teaching staff. There's 1.5 million relates to pay award for the support staff, so non-teaching staff members. We've got 628,000 relates to contract and implementation. 1.6 million relates to new and growing schools. And then 768,000 relates to other schools investment.
Okay, did that help you to understand where it's going as well? I think we need to understand the roadmap of this as well.
Nice to see how the cake is designed.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Reece, you can.
No, it's all right.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Maybe get that answer somewhere. Is there any other questions on education? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We can close that down. But hang on to your papers, because we'll be going back to the same number. Okay, children's services will be next. Thank you for attending this morning. Thank you. Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Do you want to do
Sure. So obviously our finance colleagues have given you the broad view, but what we've done in preparation for this part of the agenda is we developed another presentation to try and assure members, because you've already heard that there are financial pressures within children and adult services that we are going to have to work to mitigate against over the next 12 months. So the presentation that we're going to go into now is going to share the actions that we have already taken and will be taking forward to do exactly that, or do as much as we can to mitigate against those pressures. So if you could go to the first slide, please.
And just as well, Chair, just to say that my head of adult services has given me apologies because she's not with us. She's on annual leave, so obviously Nat Children's is here. So the first slides are focusing on children's, and then we'll go on to adults. So you've seen in the papers that within the 26-27 medium-term financial plan is a proposed uplift to the children's services budget to mitigate some of the pressure of 2.225 million, but that does still leave us specifically around residential care for children, a budget, an existing budget pressure of just over 1 million. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And these are some of the things that we already have in place and will be putting in place to mitigate those. So we've had an eliminate board in place which oversees and monitors the actions of making sure that we have enough residential provision and foster care provision for our children, and we move away from for-profit providers, which generally are very expensive provisions that our children, we've had to place our children in over years. I chair that board as director and oversee and monitor the progress in relation to that. In addition to that, Natalie chairs the Care Provision Board. So this is a board that's been stood up within the last 6 months, I would say, where Natalie gives extremely tight scrutiny and oversight to all of our children who are placed in residential care to make sure that their care planning is moving in the direction that it should be, and that gives that scrutiny to requests, any future further new requests for children to come into residential provision. So part of our plan as well is to increase our in-house residential provision for children, and we are in the process of developing an additional 2 two-bedded children's homes for our children who are currently in high-cost external placements to come back into Newport provision. Next slide, please. We've also this year set up a new, what we call MIST team. MIST is short for My Support Team, and this is supporting our children in residential care specifically. And the whole purpose of that team is twofold really. It's to prevent children from entering residential care, but also to work with the children and families who are in residential care with the plan to move them on from that provision, either back to family if that's appropriate, or to foster care. And then the next 2 bullet points then is we are also looking to increase the number of our local authority foster carers to reduce dependence on private sector and improve the respite provision offer for our children with disabilities to support them remaining living within their families, because what we established by looking at the data is there has been in recent years an increase in children with disabilities coming into care. So those are the mitigation measures that we have got in place, and happy to pause at that point to take any questions maybe in relation to children's services, and then I can move on to the adults.
Yes, that's fine. Okay, is there any questions so far regarding the children's services, online or in-house? Councillor Reynolds.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to change my questions slightly based on what you just said, Daniel, actually, because you've given a little bit more detail than I originally had. I wanted to ask about the eliminate agenda. Chair, I probably should convey an interest here, actually. I should have said it at the start, but just so everyone's aware, I actually work in children's care for a private contractor. So just to let you know that sort of context.
I'm not quite sure how that works out. I don't know.
I'll just note the declaration.
Yes, no.
I've got no personal
no
financial interest in it.
Yeah,
I just work for the company.
I've noted your declaration.
Yeah, obviously in the report it says that there's just over 2.2 million investments going towards children's services for the Innovate agenda. And I was going to ask about what that provision, what that extra money is going to be used for, what it's going to look like. But it sounds like you've mentioned two-bedroom properties. So is that where the bulk of that money is going to go?
So that is to plug a gap, if you like. So there's a pressure. There's a bigger pressure than the 2.2, as based on the children that are currently in our care. We don't have a budget to meet that demand. So
yeah, you mentioned there's still $1 million also.
Yes, the 2.2 investment is to meet that current demand, or some of that current demand. We still have just over $1 million that we don't have with this and those mitigating actions I've just described. We're going to be working very hard over the next 12 months to really make sure that everything happens as it should, to try and avoid that pressure reoccurring into the next financial year.
Right, so just so I understand it, with the extra properties that are hopefully going to be purchased for council authority care, you say there's about $1 million deficits for current demand as well.
Yeah.
If that was then met, would that be enough to bring all children in private care back into local authority care? Or have I misunderstood that?
No, I think probably that would be the case today. However, as we all know, working with people is very unpredictable, and it's tricky to predict demand. We do the best we can with the data we have, but that may not be the case.
Right. Okay, thanks. I think so, yeah. I said I've changed my question slightly based on what you've already said. So yeah, you've given as much information as we can get. Thanks.
Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I can't see a minute because the presentation is up there, but I'll try and go without. That's fine. The question I've got mostly is the two-part side of things. So the first part of it is basically about the outer of county placements and things like that there. Will the income coming in help address that in any way? I know we said about the residential homes, things like that there, but we do have obviously complex issues with some young people because of their needs, that some may never come back, and just about how we're looking to address that. Are we looking at working together in more partnership locally to bring them closer to home rather than far away, if that makes sense there? I suppose the other point of that as well is looking at that Friday night provision, as I call it, like, you know, that kind of thing when you're stuck at 5 o'clock on a Friday. Well, what do we do? We've got, you know, a young person needed a placement. How are we with that type of thing there? Because obviously that can lead into quite costly, you know, in terms of cost moving forward, and it does bring up some surprises financially to the authority, and can potentially also lead, along with agency fees, things like that, there, to overspends. So I think the second part of my question is, how confident are we that a lot of this investment being put in for the challenges will address those, and will we be looking at potential overspends throughout the year on that side? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I'll begin with answering your question in terms of how we're working together with other partners. Tanya alluded to the care provision panel that we currently have set up, and that panel is made up of various departments across the council that work with our young people. That panel doesn't just monitor children in residential care out of authority, but it monitors children in residential in-house, also children in our out-of-county foster care provisions. So we go through all of those children. We look at their wellbeing, but we also look at their costs and their packages to ensure that where possible, we can move children swiftly back into Newport, but also ensuring that they have an appropriate education package
that they can return to as well. So that is under significant scrutiny, and I have monthly meetings with partners to review that. In Newport, we are quite fortunate in terms of our numbers of children that are placed in out of authority foster care, because we have a relatively low number in comparison to other local authorities. What I will say is that we manage with applying some variations to foster carers when children are requiring accommodation where we haven't been able to plan that. So in I suppose cases of emergency, as you referred to. In terms of, you know, complexity of need, I think, you know, the business case that preceded the budget pressure in relation to residential care did in-depth analysis really in terms of what is the need in Newport, you know, what are the behaviours that we're seeing, what are the challenges in terms of matching our children, hence why we've now we are at the moment we're looking to develop a further two-bedders, but we've got another two-bedder that we are currently refurbing and awaiting registration, because what we've identified is for some children we can't just place them into settled residential provisions, but they might have a period of time where they just need to regulate in smaller home environments. There was lots of parts to that question, Councillor Marshall, so I'm not sure if I've answered all of those.
Yeah, so just to come in, I think the second part was about how do we manage the Friday night, you know, the unexpected on a Friday. And what I will say is that, you know, if we have to accommodate children, you know, at short notice, that some of our foster carers are extremely flexible, and we're able to put in exemption, thank you, the word didn't come to my mind then, an exemption, so we can place more children with them than they may have been approved for. So that's one way that we would deal with something that came in unexpected. If the needs of the child were more complex, then we with the numbers of children's homes that we have, we may be able, if we had space, we may be able to match the needs of that child within our existing provision. And the worst case, not the worst case, no, but the least favourable option would be that we would have to set up a bespoke provision for that child at short notice. What the team are very good at doing is that is a very short period of time that child will be in that provision. So we would very quickly move them on to something more suitable. So I think we've got a number of strands to our bow to be able to meet an unforeseen need that comes in at short notice, and that the team have had a lot of experience of dealing with that.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Can I go back to the questions I asked earlier?
Do you want to ask them again?
Yeah, please. It was regarding the on page 36, the loss of RAF funding. It's estimated at 50%, which seems quite a lot. Is there any way that you're going to mitigate against that loss of funding?
Yeah, so just to put a bit of context around that for members, so there's a pressure there for the children's and adult services. So there's a number of services that are being delivered that are funded by the Regional Integration Fund. So it's grant monies, and that fund comes to an end in April 27. And we have no indication from Welsh Government at this moment in time that it's going to continue beyond that. We believe it is. So this has been put in case that grant money stops. And what it will mean for services in Newport is that if that grant money stops, we have a pot of money set aside where we can continue some of those services. Not all of them. We don't have, so it could mean that we may have to reduce the level of services that we deliver. But we have to take it a step at a time. This is almost a bit of a safety net for us. We've been working with the Regional Integration Fund for many years, and it's had many iterations. It was the Integrated Care Fund before that. It's likely that it will reoccur, but it will have different parameters around it, different guidance. It may not be to the extent that we get it. I would be very surprised if it didn't continue in some way, shape or form. But obviously we don't know, and this is why this safety net has been put in place.
Okay, another question I have is, okay, Chair, is also on page 36 with regard to the 2.6 million budget for investment from reserves. I always seem to be reluctant to use reserves. So what is that investment going to be?
So this is a previously agreed reserve that was agreed. I'm just going to look to my finance colleagues.
That's just the reversal of last year's. It's basically the reversal of last year's transfer. So it's just an accounting adjustment within the MTFP. Okay. It's just last year we had a transfer from reserves of that budget. So that was the last year's reserve one-off and didn't eliminate, but they're not getting that this year, so it's just to reverse that base budget out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an
okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We can go back to page 33. Looked after children, demand, still under stress with regards to Home Office grants being insufficient. How are we going to meet this going forward this year? What's our plan?
So we did put a budget pressure in for this year. We will be that budget will be uplifted this year. That's I'm looking to Mario and let me blank, and I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that is the case. Yes, I looked at the wrong shoulder. I do apologise. Thank you. Yes.
Just to clarify, then, there's no one from finances answering. Is this correct?
203,000.
Thank you. There we go.
There we are.
There we go. Thank you. Do you want to add anything else to that? Or?
No, thank you, Chair.
You've done very well then. Everybody. Are there any other questions on children's services?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I've noted to come back in just off one of the points there, just a bit further. Thank you. It's just about the confidence about the where we'll be likely in terms of next year and throughout the year in terms of any overspend, because children's services, be it the fantastic work that is being done by the team and very creative, very innovative and transformative, it still does come over what is actually predicted. So just in terms of that, with these budget pressures, things like that, in addressing those, how confident are you that we'll be in a better position and hopefully not see as much kind of overspends throughout the year and moving forward? Is that a potential likelihood? Thank you.
I'll respond to that, Councillor Marshall. You know, we hope to work within our budgets within children's services, but I think, as you know, we all know, within people services, things are very unpredictable. So as Sarah mentioned earlier, in respect of education, I don't think I can give a 100% commitment that our budget's not going to be overspent. But what I can say is that, you know, we continue to try and work within our budget as best as we possibly can, and where there's pressures, we raise those with our finance colleagues promptly.
Thank you, Natalie. And as I said again, I appreciate the team. It does fantastic work within the scope of that. It wouldn't be amiss just to ask those to see where we are when we come in, obviously, to the finances. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watkins.
What sort of support do you actually get from social housing?
Social housing landlords.
Organisations which are in the case.
So we, I'll answer that, Councillor Watkins. So we work quite closely actually with registered social landlords in terms of, you know, consideration when we're working to develop residential provisions to see whether or not they will purchase a property, we can lease it. We also work with registered social landlords in terms of developing 16+ accommodation as well for young people. There are not that many registered social landlords out there, to be honest, but we've got some relationships with some that are prepared to support children's social care.
Chair, what I was looking for is part of the answer. When we find that we have to take an individual into care because the accommodation is not suitable, can we look at registered social landlords changing the parameters within the property to be able to prevent that individual coming into NCC's care?
So are you referring to when children are with their parents at home and there's issues at home?
Yes.
What I would say is that we would not bring a child into care because of poor housing conditions. We would work really closely with that housing provider, whoever that was, to make sure that the issues were dealt with, because that would be a very inappropriate reason for a child to come into care. We would only bring children into care where you know, the child had care and support needs, whatever those needs might be. The housing, in my view, will be something that we would deal with to prevent that from happening.
So you have a good communication with the registered social landlords?
Yeah, absolutely. We work very closely in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Because we're going to move on now with the. Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
That's okay, Chair. Just a quick one, really. You just mentioned from my colleague about you would get in touch with landlords if the properties were in a state of disrepair, if there was a child in the property. Do you do that across the board? For argument's sake, we've got a lady who's stuck in overcrowding, been like that for 5 years. She has got serious issues. The children are suffering, but housing won't move her to a bigger property because she's got to keep bidding on a bidding list, which is about 5 years long. So would you offer support to that family in those circumstances?
I think we would take, what we would do is we would take a multi-agency view of grant support, because some of those solutions to that issue wouldn't be within the social services gift to resolve. So
no.
It would actually be within the housing service, but we have very close links with our housing colleagues within the local authority. But I think, just to be clear, I think the question that Councillor Watkins posed was if a child came into care because of poor housing. You know, I think maybe Councillor Harvey, you're describing a slightly different situation there. I'm not saying that it's right or it's correct, and I'm sure there are lots of concerns related to that, what you just described. Yeah. But we would, you know, we would do what we could to work with our housing colleagues. But ultimately, the allocation of alternative housing provision isn't within social services gift.
No, that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on now to the second part of the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the adult services situation. So again, in the draft budget that's been set, it recognises that there is a budget pressure. This is within your papers of £1.460 million. And just to be clear, that those pressures are made up from transport costs, one-to-one support provided within residential care settings, people who are living in supported living arrangements, and then the biggest pressure there you can see relates to domiciliary hours provided. So on to the next slide, please. This is what we're doing to mitigate against this. So a clear scheme of delegation is going to be implemented to agree all future independent living packages of support. So that will be at service manager level. All existing packages of independent living support are currently in the process of being reviewed to make sure that they are still the right provision for those people. We're going to reshape what we call our re-ablement offer, and what that, for those not familiar with that language, is about making sure that we support people to remain as independent as possible, to prevent long-term dependence on social services, but also to keep them as independent as possible living in their own homes. So that is something that the teams they're currently undertaking a significant review in that area of work. And then the next slide, please. We're also looking to maximise the use of assisted technology. It is with us. There are lots of technical things that can be put into people's homes to, again, allow them to remain in their own homes for as long as possible. It's not going to meet every need, obviously, but there are many that it can meet and reduce the need for other services, and definitely we're progressing that. And then also reviewing the existing packages of care of people living in residential care where they need one-to-one support, to make sure that they are still required, to see if there's any way we can bring that budget pressure down, and then also develop an evidence-based approach to all new requests for care homes and supported living. So those are some of the things that the head of adult services is, some of them are in place already, some of them are due to be put in place. They will all be in place by the beginning of the financial year to support with mitigation.
Thank you. Okay, any questions? Councillor Watkins.
You mentioned about care services in regards to learning disabilities and people turning 18, and there's a pressure there in regards to ageing carers. How have you actually managed to accommodate that?
Okay, so our children and adult services departments work very closely together. So when children with disabilities turn 18, that we're clear about what their future plan is, because clearly their needs don't just stop at that point. They go on into adulthood, and there's a lot of transition. We have specific transition workers that see the children and families through that period. So we make sure that they go into the most appropriate provision, and that varies massively. It could be that they continue to remain with their parents, and those parents would then be assessed as unpaid even before. As children, unpaid carers, and support could include respite, it could include direct payments to enable the children to move, and then adults to remain living at home for as long as possible. So there's a number of different options. It could be that they enter into a supported living arrangement, which is what's been highlighted there. Is some of those independent living arrangements is where children and young adults beyond 18 live in maybe a shared home, and it's staffed to meet their needs. So we're in the process of developing more of that within Newport. Just a few months ago, there was a new home that opened within Newport. We don't own the home, but we certainly commission our Newport people have been do live there. So we worked in partnership with a registered social landlord, you know, and an independent care provider to provide quality care to meet those needs. So there's a number of different ways that we can make sure that those needs are met, both from the person's point of view, but also from the family's point of view as well.
Chair, I have a question.
Just have you finished?
Sorry.
No, one other question is, what support are you putting in place for respite services to prevent the adult coming into care home, something like that?
Yeah, so there's as I just mentioned, there is a number of different avenues that can be accessed. One of them would be what we call our direct payments system. So it's a mechanism whereby the family can receive financial support through the direct payments to pay for somebody to come in and undertake, help them with whatever they may need within the home, provide care, take that person out to clubs in the community, that sort of thing. It's very much dependent on what the assessed need is, but so there's that mechanism of families receiving that money to support them to remain independent, you know, to keep that provision together. There is, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of other provisions.
I'm looking for the support to the family rather than the individual with learning disabilities.
So the family
taking the learning disability individual out of the family to give the family the respite. So we have short breaks as well. Sorry, thank you for the reminder. So we have a home within Newport as well that provides short breaks. That has come back into the local authority. So we're now responsible for that. We did commission that out for a period of time, but now we are running that ourselves. That's been back in the local authority domain for probably the last 18 months. The feedback we're getting from families about how that is helping them is been extremely positive. So they can come in for weekends, evenings, a day, one day, so it is very flexible. If they need to go to maybe a family wedding or something like that, absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
I want to bring you in, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chair. Demand-led pressures are specifically children's, adults and housing. We all know that. And you're redesigning services to reduce the demand cost. Children will come back in-house provisions. ALM with the capacity, we don't have enough and we all are aware. And housing are taking actions to reduce B&B use. What exactly are health doing to support the council when we have, because you don't know what you don't know. And that's a problem with demand-led pressures. We can't say next month this is going to happen because we just don't know. So are health helping in any way with adults coming in to our services for us to pick up?
I think that's an interesting question to pose, and I think what I can say is that we do work closely with our health colleagues. Of course we do, as we should, both for children and adults. We have in Newport with what we call an integrated services partnership board, a bit of a mouthful, and the purpose of that board is to look at how the health and social care needs of the people of Newport can be met from a preventative to downstream, because by the time people enter statutory services, it's a bit tricky there for that landscape to change. So there is working on that level. to strategically try and come from a preventative point of view. Public health have a massive part to play in this, and so we are very much around the table and trying to work with our health colleagues to achieve that. These, some of it is societal, it's all, it's very poverty related. There's so many contributing factors. It's not an easy tanker to turn around, but I can reassure you, Councillor Harvey, that we, as social care colleagues, we are absolutely around the table and having those conversations with health about what can be done.
Good, because it is a multifaceted problem and not one service can fix everything. So what I'm trying to glean really was, our health helping? As well as we play our part, health should be playing their part. Housing should also be playing a part, because if the person's in a house with damp issues, that's not going to help them health-wise. So what I'm trying to say is, even though it's multifaceted, are everybody playing the same way? So it's not all just left, oh, the council can fix it. It doesn't work like that. We all know that.
I think it's a really clever question. And it's a poignant question. Just as an aside, I think we have too many budgets and too many people protecting their budgets, no matter where they come from. There's one of the problems we face, instead of having, in my view, instead of having one allocation, there we go. We wouldn't be defending budgets, then would we? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Tanya, part of your presentation, you mentioned that one of the ways of mitigating some of the budget pressures that you're under is, I think the phrase was, some of the high cost packages going to be reviewed. Does that imply some sort of impact on the levels of provision? When you say reviewing the high cost packages, are you able to sort of put a flash on?
Yeah, so I think what I'm saying is, some of what when we've taken a deeper dive into this area, we recognise that some packages to support work were set up at a certain point in time, and they needed to be reviewed because people's needs change. It's not to say that we're going to take services away from people who need them, if they still need them. Then also will be provided, but it's just making sure our reviewing mechanisms that we've revisited the original package that was put in place, and making sure that it is still needed and necessary.
Right, so it's updating the services and making sure they're still appropriate,
yes,
rather than necessarily reducing.
Yes, only if we would if it was appropriate.
Yeah. I wanted to check because when people who read those sorts of phrases, high cost packages being reviewed, usually that's a sort of code for we're going to be reducing service.
We wouldn't leave any person at risk, and and if they needed a certain level of service, we would continue to provide them.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Councillor Cleverly.
Thank you. This is a hypothetical question. One of my residents, she's in her 70s, she's got 4 children, 3 of them have got learning difficulties. I don't think they're on the radar of social services because she's quite a proud lady. And the oldest boy, I think he's in his 40s, and then the other 2 are in their 30s or whatever. If anything happened to her, what would happen to their children, basically?
I think that's a bit tricky question to answer in this arena, but maybe be happy to have a conversation with you, outside outside of this.
Because if she's getting on, I know her health isn't that good.
I know that
I know that neighbours and
I know
friends.
Yeah, we've had the answer. Thank you. I know that we're all passionate about what we do all around this table. But I think our personal wards are going to step out and get a different avenue. But I let you get away with it because I like you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if I can come back on something we proposed earlier on in the meeting about the real living wage. I don't know if you were going to pick that back up.
I was, but thank you.
because I have an answer.
I was waiting for that.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the question was how can we be assured that the domiciliary care contracts that we commission, that those providers do pay the living wage. So if that is within the contracts that we issue, to state that that must be the case. So if those providers didn't provide that, they would be in breach of their contract if they didn't follow that. And as a department, as our commissioning team, we routinely check with the providers to verify that the real living wage is being paid. And that's the same with our care home providers as well. And what we're finding is that compliance is not really an issue. We have found that that is a problem because the providers need to offer that level of wage to be competitive in the market because everybody's needing a workforce to deliver the services. So hopefully that provides some assurance.
It provides as much assurance as you can give. I mean, there is a question. What if they were in breach and the contract was already active?
We would have mechanisms, they would be effectively be in breach of contract. So there would be mechanisms that we can then, we'd have to speak to our procurement colleagues to get into dialogue with that provider about taking action for their breach of contract.
But we also know that placements are very hard to get. And you're in a difficult arena with regards to all of that, but you're doing the best you can to ensure that everybody complies to the way that the authority wishes them to comply. Councillor Watkins.
Chair, I don't know whether it's relevant here, but I have a concern in regards to Appendix 4, fees and charges.
Yeah.
The consultation. I noticed that people with facilities standard rate, and there's an increase of 35%. And the standard rate of 22.9%. I don't know whether I think that's a little bit on the steep side, but I'm concerned that that increase is quite a lot for 26, 27. Just a comment.
Which page? Sorry, Councillor.
It's on Appendix 4.
On 43, yeah.
Yeah, I've got 44 here.
That's why it's the essential dealing with those.
Fees and charges, consultation.
Yeah, each one.
Just a comment, really. The charges for consultation.
Okay, so thank you for that. So what I can say that relates to yeah, it is so the unit costs were calculated for that provision, and we had to cover the cost of the provision of that service. So we've obviously undertaken a review of the costs to run that service, and as a result we've had to increase to that level to make sure that it pays, it covers the costs to the local authority, because not only do we use that for our Newport residents, we also, when it's appropriate, relevant, allow other local authorities to use that provision.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, there's no other questions. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation this morning and your time. It certainly is, as I say, keep the best to last. I don't know why. Prevention?
Oh, prevention, sorry, Chair. There is no presentation for prevention and inclusion. Head of Service Caroline Ryan Phillips is on the call remotely because they don't have, I'm very pleased to say, any forecast budget pressures. They have a very small core budget anyway, and they have a significant amount of service delivery based on grants. So the only point that I would make there is that they are not confirmed grants. So if for whatever reason those grants were to be withdrawn by Welsh Government, that would have a significant impact on the services that team delivers.
Okay. Any questions on what's just been said, please?
Everyone, in regards to the grants, what is the possibility of those grants being increased? I know it'd be lovely, but
Let's try.
I couldn't answer that, I'm afraid, Councillor Watkins.
obviously then I would be looking to increase the service, if that's the case.
Yes.
Okay. What's our fallback if the grants weren't to materialise?
I think there's over £20 million worth, £27 million worth of grants that is.
So I know it's massive.
It is. So I think it would be very difficult time for the.
So Chair, there's a working assumption in the budgets that as specific grants change, services will need to change accordingly. So it's essentially, if we want to come in with those grants, we would need to cut services that they fund accordingly. Unless the council wanted to invest its own money to keep those going. Obviously, you wouldn't know that's the case because these grants are not actually notified to us until much later on in the kind of March, April, May time.
Okay. So do you have enough money in the pot to keep you going until they're?
The grants are there now.
Yes, they are. The grants have been confirmed until April 27. Yeah, right. So that they are there. There's a very clear mandate that you cannot spend beyond the grant. So
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something that we need to handle then.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
When we get to know the grant value, what does that mean? And we will manage it from there.
Councillor Marshall.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, really good work being undertaken by the preventative team. I suppose with the question being direct just obviously for the budgetary side of things there is just how can we be assured that the work currently being done by prevention and inclusion makes a long-term effect and not just coping with the pressures of today? I think that's important to address because I know it is hard to quantify in data, but how can we assure things like, for example, when we used to have communities first, for example, communities, as good as the work they used to do with individuals, those individuals will do well, they might move, and then obviously we have new people in. So it's just about how, we're working towards that and how we can objectively say this is what change has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall, and I think that's a really valid question, and we'll be working in the coming year to look at the data as a whole that is being collected, because we're very eager as well to be able to say we've had this much grant monies is delivered these services, so what difference has it actually made? There's a lot of anecdotal information. What we need to improve within our service area is the evidence base and the data to be able to answer that question more fully. And we have every intention of doing that in this next financial year.
Caroline, do you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair. No, I mean, probably not much to add to what Tanya's already said. There was a real, again, I've said it before, it's not unique to Newport, but there's a bit of a national issue about how we can meaningfully measure preventative approaches and how we can measure that over time, because obviously we do a lot of work with people when they're young, and how do we know that makes a difference as they grow into adults, and so on and so forth, and what kind of opportunities that they have. What I will say is that in each and every service that we have absolute outcome measures, so that we are measuring the impact and the distance and the improvements that individuals are making as a result of our services and our interventions. So we do that on a team level, and then obviously one of the things for me to do is to pull that together, and that analysis would come through in our yearly service plans, so that my job is to demonstrate the difference all these teams and interventions are making, albeit on a small level. We're working towards that, the position and a kind of a national position of how we all, not just local authority, but household in that as well, how do we all measure preventative help and early help approaches much better, because it needs to be done, because that's what everybody is saying we all need to be doing, to be saving money, to be more efficient, to provide better outcomes for individuals. But what we don't have behind this is a really robust infrastructure to help us measure that over a long period of time. So that's the kind of narrative that we are constantly having. Thank you.
Just going to take a really short comfort break. See what I mean? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, are there any other questions on this subject? Yes.
It's just a quick, I'm not sure whether this is aimed at Tanya or Caroline, to be honest, so you can fight over who wants to answer this. It's just something that occurred to me when you were talking about the funding. I'm assuming that the funding is confirmed on a year-by-year basis. And I'm just wondering how that impacts in terms of your long-term planning. And the reason I'm asking the question is I used to work for Communities First, and one of my bugbears in those days was everything was short term. From my point of view, everything was short term. We were going quarter to quarter and had to justify your funding for quarter to quarter, which then made us go for the easy wins. So we'd be going for projects where we have easy wins, bums on seats, but not necessarily doing the work that needed to be doing with the people who needed the work doing with. And I'm just wondering, how does this level of funding impact your long-term planning? As I'm not sure who wants to answer that.
Yeah, no, I can start, but I think that there's no doubt it is a challenge. The programmes that have been funded, as much as that we only get confirmation year on year. So, for example, Families First and Flying Start, very well established projects and programmes, and particularly the Flying Start programme, as you know, there has been there has been a long-term vision about increasing the number of the childcare offer to children across Newport, enhanced health visiting, speech and language, parenting support. So there's a long-term delivery plan in place. You know, we're delivering the same things with a long-term interventions, even though the short-term funding. So it hasn't hindered.
Right.
It does, of course, it does. And one thing I'd also like to add is very often with short-term funding, you find that it has an impact on your staff groups as well. Because this has been rolled over for so many years with the Welsh Government, we don't necessarily have that problem with retaining staff within the programme. But there's no doubt it is a challenge. But you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that we go for the quick wins, but what you've described there definitely are challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think back in those Communities First days, it was slightly different because it was literally quarter to quarter,
Yeah.
whereas at least you're talking about annual grants. Yeah. Confirmation of funding, so you've got a little bit more flexibility there. But yeah, I just wanted to ask the question. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much indeed for attending.
I think, Chair, there were no specific recommendations on any of the service areas from the committee, so are the committee happy for me to just say we can end with the proposals as they are?
Well, I mean, what came up with, as you mentioned at the beginning, was the scrutiny of the service going forward, rather than the scrutiny of the budget, because it is not budget to scrutinise really. It's the difference of the service, and it's going forward, so we have to see that going forward.
I suppose that would be done through our end of mid-review reports. Yeah. So in terms of the overall budget service areas you've looked at, are there any specific recommendations you want me to note, or are we content with proposals as they stand? Or any comments anyone wishes to make?
Just a comment, yeah, I think I've been regards to that increase for those day services. I think they would rather.
Yeah,
I do understand the reason. 30 and 20%.
No, I've made a note about it.
Okay.
Doesn't matter, I think the way it's run.
We're up to you now.
Yes, yeah, I want to meet for reports. Just to add, I've had apologies from Councillor Townsend to chair, so we will add those into the minutes. If we look first at the affordable work programme, which is going into the middle first, but just to say there are no changes at the minute, only 12 meeting times. Our next meeting is the 17th of February for the pupil attendance report and the pupil exclusion report.
Thank you.
Thank you. And they'll be coming from the service area, obviously. I've just noticed an error on my whole work programme, is that the new report has been taken off the 7th of March meeting, and it's being pushed into the June meeting, only because the parameters are changing slightly and Sarah doesn't want to report all this. So we'll have to most up-to-date data in June rather than looking back.
So the time is still 11 o'clock.
Still 11 o'clock, that's,
Yeah,
I see no
it's
change.
set there now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Okay.
Lovely.
Good.
If I start with our actions then, we've got a couple of ongoings, but they're nothing to worry about. And a couple of, well, we've got one that's outstanding at the minute, but I have chased that, so hopefully we'll get a response. And then we've got a couple of outstanding outcomes, but again, I'm chased those and just waiting for a response really. Yeah, any questions, or are we all happy with that generally?
We're content with that.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your attendance this morning and, well, this morning and into the afternoon. And I shall see you at the next meeting, if not before. But thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.